My name is Ben Landhauser. I'm the Executive Vice President of Lifestyle Communities. We are the development group that has the entire lower campus of Luther Seminary under contract. So we do not have the upper campus, which was recently announced as kind of going for sale. We don't have that piece of property under contract, but we understand that we were kind of the start of things that are kind of evolving in this general area with the golf course going for sale and now the seminary selling the upper campus. But really our intent tonight, we appreciate being here in the City of Lauderdale, is give you a little context of kind of where we've been and kind of the path that we're heading. We don't yet have a formal application into the City of Lauderdale, but as we kind of talk a little bit more here this evening, I hope you understand why we are where we are. We're taking a lot of community feedback. This would be our third open house that we've had. First in the City of Lauderdale specifically. We've had two other open houses that I recognize a number of friendly faces that have come and joined us at the Olson Campus Center as well.
Breckwoods.
And we've also met with the Friends of Breckwoods. So I guess this would be our fourth group meeting. With me tonight, Tim Nichols, our CEO at Lifestyle Communities, and then Jennifer Hastamp is the planner with the City of Lauderdale. I'm going to let her talk a little bit on behalf of kind of Lauderdale's ordinance. Before I pass the baton to her really quick, so those of you that came in, we obviously have a bit of information in front of you. At our most recent open house at the Olson Campus Center, we presented three different concepts for the entirety of the lower campus. So those concepts that are here before you tonight, same thing if you haven't seen them before, same thing we presented maybe a month or so ago at Olson Campus Center. And really the objective of going through that exercise was taking different uses that we have with other development partners we know we could perform on, but get a reaction of, are we arranging them in the right way? Are we missing something? Are we doing too much, too little, whatever those things were? So we got a lot of comment cards similar to you all coming tonight that kind of gave feedback to things like traffic or how could we better protect the woods? Could there be a better connection through the property that really similar to how the seminary's campus today is a very easy kind of walk or meandering path through the neighborhood. How could we do bits and pieces of those kinds of things? So that's kind of where we've been with the three different concepts. We gave on each board, gives you kind of a little bit, if we did this, here's kind of traffic assumptions, how much area we're taking up, what's left for green space, all those kinds of things. The other two boards here are just kind of the property as it exists and a little bit of zoning information. So some part of the property is in St. Paul. We're focused here again on Lauderdale. So again, some of the kind of ordinance information at a high level. Jennifer will go into more details in a minute. And then we're really looking at taking the next step, specifically our company, Redevelop Cooperatives. So our Tessa is our current brand of cooperatives. We were involved in developing the Zabago Cooperative of St. Anthony Park, located at Luther Place in Como. We really feel compelled in some of the feedback from, again, individuals that commented back to us on the three different concepts at our last open house, that Lauderdale is our place to do a co-op. We feel like we have the least impact to the woods if there's going to be some type of development. And we feel like it's a really good fit as another ownership option in the City of Lauderdale. So I'll talk a little bit more about kind of our cooperatives here in a bit, but these two boards up here really, again, give a little more context to where those primary paths, I couldn't get all of them in there. I spent 2 hours with our architects on site on Monday, but some of the main walking paths through the woods that some people may be familiar with, that's the first ward closest to me. And the next one is an initial stab at us kind of taking what our architect thinks we could do from a building footprint standpoint, and then layer in some of the information we now have. We've done a tree study. We've started a wetland delineation. So as we layer in that information, what's it telling us that our conceptual footprint is a good idea? It's not quite there. I'll tell you with certainty, what we end up proposing in a formal submission to the City of Lauderdale won't be that. But that's where we started. So that's what we're trying to get a reaction of from you all. Are we headed in the right path? And I think that's probably a good caveat to have Jennifer just elaborate what the city's vision and kind of the methodology of how we should be approaching it are, and then we'll see if we're headed in the right path.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So I'm Jenna Krajaskamp. I'm a city planner, consulting city planner. I had been working with the City of Lauderdale since 2019, I think, 2018. I don't know, quite some time. And over the years, we've obviously spent a great deal of time studying what is commonly referred to as Brackwoods. And by studying, what I mean is we address it pretty extensively through the 2040 Comprehensive Plan update process in terms of what shouldn't go there, what would we like to see there in light of the fact that we know we have to allow some type of development on that particular parcel. And so if that's our starting point, how do we say what can go here, right? What can be developed while still protecting a significant amount of the natural resource component, and in this case, the Brackwoods or the wooded areas. So as you all know, for those of you who have traversed the site several times, there's varying levels of quality that exists within that wooded area. And so some of the intent and purpose behind both the comprehensive plan and then later the zoning keys that got adopted, which I'll talk about in just a moment, was how do we say where the most important parts, where the highest natural resource value parts of that parcel, how do we figure out the way to protect those into perpetuity, and how do we focus in on the areas of lesser quality and where development should go. So we as a city don't have the ability to actually say, hey, developer, this is exactly how you should develop your property. But what we do have the right and the ability to do is through our ordinances and through our comprehensive plan to say, look, we think there's something important here. We'd like to protect it. Here are the strategies that we need to employ in order to decide and figure out where to appropriately site your project. And so we can give all the guidance that we want, but sometimes we don't always get there at the end, but hopefully we will in this case. So in terms of what is on this board, I just want to highlight at a very high level that I will be here for the whole open house and happy to answer any questions you might have, is the fact that during the comprehensive planning period or process, we designated this particular parcel as high density residential conservation. What that means is that there is a density range that was assigned to the particular parcel. In this case, it was 10.01 units per acre up to 30 units per acre. That range went into our comprehensive plan. It's also blessed, for lack of a better way of saying it, by the Metropolitan Council. So at a minimum, the 10.01 establishes our baseline. The comp plan talks about how there's value in natural resources, but it doesn't talk about the implementation of the how. That next step was actually the zoning ordinance update process. So once the comprehensive plan was adopted, it moved into that zoning ordinance component. We did, I went back to my notes and almost couldn't believe it. It was back in 2019, early 2020, actually before the pandemic, that we had several times with city council, members of the public. We were out at the farmers market, had a booth, and we talked about the high density residential conservation zoning district and how that zoning piece of it could be implemented to achieve our objective as stated within the land use plan. And so on this work, you'll see that I've highlighted a couple of key components from that ordinance that was eventually adopted by the city council. And essentially what that ordinance says is we've got a set of conservation objectives. The conservation objectives do obviously hone in and focus in on the natural resource quality that exists on the property. It goes through a process of what the developer has to do in terms of its existing conditions analysis. It is called what we call natural resources inventory. It involves several components. Van touched on a couple of them. So the stream inventory, the wetland delineation, and licensed individuals in their specialization need to complete those things. So the wetland delineator has a specific certification. They need to be able to demonstrate that an individual has completed the wetland delineation. An ecologist needs to identify quality or a similar educational background to ensure that when we say these things are what they are, that we know that they are. So instead of saying, oh, a tree is of poor quality, a expert needs to actually have done that. It is not just the developer walking out on site saying, I like that tree and I don't like that tree. So we would essentially with an ordinance establish, here's what we need to do. We need to identify what these existing conditions are and let that be the guide as to where those developable areas really should be focused. And so the conservation objectives include not only the natural resources component, but it also talks about the trail component. So obviously there's the footpaths that exist through this particular site that the community has enjoyed over the years. So how do you ensure that those meshes, whether they are in alternate location or remain in the current locations, how do we make sure that those connections remain intact? How do we look for opportunities to incorporate innovative site design elements that can go not only to the site design, but also the building design as well? And so the developer is going to be charged with how you meet these conservation objectives. And it's going to be up to them to demonstrate to the city council and to the city through its land use application process that what they're proposing meets those conservation objectives. And in exchange, they will be given higher amounts of density, right? So the idea is that in order for them to achieve the high end of the density range, they're going to have to meet several of these conservation objectives, and they're going to have to successfully demonstrate how they've met those through the application process. So as been noted, they've not begun this process formally with the city. They're in the early sort of information collection process, I would call it. They've obviously begun to use some of their studies and done some of the existing conditions analysis. But that's basically them starting. And they've not been in front of the city council yet with even a concept at this stage. So the idea is that once they come in and initiate the formal process, a lot of this background information will have already synthesized. They will have identified for you all this evening potential ways in which their plan as it stands might be improved. And that once they come forward, they can demonstrate how they listen to the community, but also how they have responded to your ordinance. And so from that respect, I think it's great that you have been curious, Evie, to hear from you, hear what you have to say. I know I recognize many of you from 6 years ago when we went through this process initially, so I'm glad to see that you're here again. And hopefully this time, because this is developer number 4 or 5, that we have a project that really represents and supports our ordinance and our comprehensive plan. So from that perspective, I will say for the remainder of the open house, I'm happy to answer any questions about the ordinance, and if it's about the development, tap what I used to.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. So before I kind of open it back up for you to come kind of acclimate yourselves or ask Tim, myself, or Jennifer questions, I'm going to focus on this far board over here, and some of you may not be able to see it well, but I'm not going to get like down to pointillism, just concept. So this last board, just so you understand where you're looking at, because there's a lot of color and information that's actually on here. So part of our current approach to kind of what Jennifer outlined was kind of the city's desire to see is layer in kind of that existing condition reality along with practical development applications. So from our standpoint, we're really looking at Lauderdale being the best place for the co-op for the reasons I mentioned before. We can condense that overall footprint. There's not as much development, supportive development needed within the property, that we can preserve as much of the Breck Woods as possible. Some of the other things that aren't on here that I just want you to be aware of, all of the utilities supporting this development, the closest connection is coming off of kind of Hoyt and Fulham. So we're actually different from previous proposals that have been maybe in front of this group or considered for this property. The worst thing we could do in our mind of looking at topography and utility connections, street connections, is trying to pull the building down the hill. we're actually trying to keep topside as much as possible so that we can preserve and protect as much of the natural topography, the woods, and the existing conditions to the best of our ability. Won't be perfect because it's changed, but that's why we are compelled to say we're the best fit in terms of uses that could go in here. If it was anything less dense, we've had different concepts that were shown earlier of flats. We've looked at single family. Again, you're going to carve into the woods and be much more intrusive, even with a lower intensity development than what we're contemplating. So that's, again, our opinion, but we're kind of trying to visually show you what we're thinking, at least as of right now. In total, we have 70 units shown in this current building footprint. Again, not final, but we're kind of in that midpoint of the density range that Jennifer outlined that's allowed or contemplated by the ordinance, assuming that we're developing of the total 8.5 acres that's kind of in Lauderdale, we're around 3 is kind of what we would actually touch. So other things that we're trying to be cognizant of, and that's why we have kind of the trail paths through the woods. We want to keep that community connection. We're required to by kind of ordinance and the intent of the comprehensive plan, but we are looking for ways that we could double leverage if we need to get into a garage. Maybe that path doesn't need to feel like a traditional drive. Maybe it could feel like kind of a nice enhancement to getting people through the woods and then carried back into more of a crushed rock or a more natural path like what exists through the woods today. So this, if you haven't picked up on the legend or haven't made it this far yet in this evening, Jennifer hit on kind of the health of the woods. So we've got a full inventory, and what I tried to do was just simply point out with a similar graphic where poor health trees are by an arborist that's been through, and well as what's dead. So our objective is, if we're going to place a building in the woods, we'd prefer it to be where something isn't thriving right now, for things may turn for the worse and actually be dead. There's also a number of areas kind of where we currently have this open or kind of lazy L, I would call it, where there are openings in the woods. It's not actually trees right now. That if we can plug some of those gaps, that feels the most appropriate if we're going to do anything to kind of fill some of those gaps and go where the health of the woods currently isn't the best. So that's in general kind of what this graphic is doing. But again, happy to go through if people have questions. If you haven't seen any of the previous concepts that we reviewed with people that attended our open house about a month ago, happy to go through that. If you want to ask questions now, Tim and I would take them. I will say from our perspective, this is where we are. Our objective in the next month with the partners that are doing kind of the rest of the development that's contemplating those other concepts is we'd have another open house maybe the middle of August to have kind of what I would call a preferred plan. So it'll ratify what happens specifically in Lauderdale with what we think best fits and works based on feedback and comments that we've already received in the St. Paul portion of that site. So about a month away, and following that is when we'd endeavor to go to the City of Lauderdale formally with our application and start that process. Yes.
Any idea if you get what you want, how long this is going to take? Let's say from now until you break ground.
Sure. So if we were to proceed forward on the path that we believe we're on from go through the city review and approval process and assume that we can get to somewhere that is workable for the City of Lauderdale and us, we're probably wrapping up that process towards the very beginning of 2026. I think there's enough interest from people that have already been reaching out to us. We've had people that have attended some of the open house that would be interested in buying into this cooperative already, that we feel like we may need 4 to 6 months to get our pre-sale done. And then our construction time frame is around 16 months once we put a shovel in the ground to actually build a building. Time frame for the rest of the project may be in between that, there may be portions of that that go quicker than just what ours is. Some of that common infrastructure, any roadways or supportive infrastructure for the whole redevelopment of the lower campus may happen sooner, and you may see some things happen on front and back end of the schedule I just outlined. Yes, ma'am.
And you, for all the same page, can you describe what a co-op is? What?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I even said I would do that, and I did it. So the easiest way to describe it, so we do this a lot with people that are even interested, and they're like, "I've heard of co-op. Sounds like something I might be interested in." We always try to relate it to a condo because most people understand what a condo is. Every person, if you've got 80 to 70 units, we'll use that. You have 70 people that own and maybe have either a mortgage or they have title to their individual unit, and then there's some sort of a board of that condo that oversees kind of any common areas they have. We're somewhat similar, but psychologically, I would say we're very different. We also provide ownership, but instead of a single instrument of ownership, there's one master mortgage for our condo. So ownership is by giving a share, and that share gives you a proportionate 1/70th ownership of everything with exclusive rights to unit 101 or 302 or whatever private residence you've selected. And you have a monthly fee that helps pay for those amenity spaces. But it also relates to, your home may be slightly bigger than the person next to you down the hall. So your monthly relates to that. But where we're a little bit different, aside from just those kind of nuts and bolts financing or ownership, is we focus more on the community. So our amenity spaces in general are much more extensive than what a condominium developer would. We have grade rooms, we have fitness, wellness studios, smaller areas for people to kind of meet or host friends, family within the building, or, people that they've known for a long time. That it's really more of a lifestyle change. So we're a lock and leave kind of a good option for people that are looking to downsize into something that they still own, because most of the people that end up buying a share in any of our cooperatives, they're there because they're probably extremely familiar. If they don't already live in the neighborhood, they're coming pretty close, or they've been in it. They've maybe lived their daily life. Maybe they live in Falcon Heights right now, but this is just as much home as where their home was. So we're way more focused on kind of those community attributes and what you can do together versus thinking of everything of like we have 70 just units. Ours are more homes, and your home starts in a co-op when you walk in the front door of the building, not just that 101 or 302. So that's as close as I'm going to get to just, there's the difference, but the similarities as well between a condo and a co-op. Yes.
Had two questions. I assume you as I wrote carpies, and then also if it's 60 or 70 years, then how really for it would be pictured this for.
So the two questions that were asked, one dealt with parking, underground parking, and as well as like how many floors do we have? So right now we always do garage parking below level. Given the topography of the site, this concept came up and looked at the floor plans, have 2 levels of underground parking. The lowest level is kind of a 2/3 of the building footprint, just to keep our ratios right. And then the other one is basically a full level or full floor of parking spaces. And right now, just to keep our footprint as concise as possible, right now we're showing 5 stories above those garage levels. But again, this fitting into the topography, you're probably going to see maybe 4 from the people that live across the alley over here. 4 and something is probably what you're going to see, because we are cocking it into the hillside. Just from what we're showing here, there's roughly 28 feet of elevation change, which is why we're pretty confident 2 levels of underground parking. Again, we keep that footprint small and still park the amount of spaces that we have. We're in a pretty close ratio to what we did in Zivago of, if we had 70 units, we're trying to be a ratio somewhere between 1.4 and 1.5 spaces per unit that we have in that building.
Open above ground parking for many spots.
We have some above ground parking. For us, it's more of a dialogue with the city. if we drove over to Zavago right now, there's maybe 4 to 6 of those spaces that are actually used on a daily basis. I think of the property that Zavago owns, there's maybe 14 total spaces, something like that. And other than bigger events where they might be bringing, a big friends or family group in for hosting, they don't get used. So we're not going to try to overkill it with surface parking. One, because again, we'll try to preserve as much of the property as it is. But two, it just won't get used that often. So we're maybe in that 12 to 20 would be a lot for us, but kind of in that range. Ma'am, one of you had a question.
You answered it.
Oh, good. I'll just keep talking. I won't answer the questions. Yes.
I have a lot of questions, but one is to do the size of this project. It's larger than Zlayo, and
It
then
is.
into the numbers that you had in 1666 conference, which is a large project, and this is ecologically sensitive area. How did you settle on this size?
So we haven't settled, but we're trying to figure out what is that right number. So we know right now the demand at Zavago is immense. I think they have 49 units. You're right. 70 is much bigger than the 49 we have there. But there's 200 some odd people that are on their wait list. 224. That most of those people will never sniff an opportunity of something going for sale to do something. So we know that the demand is there. And what we're trying to rationalize is how much is enough. We won't meet 100% of that demand, but how much is enough that it makes sense to develop sensitively this property. So again, we may still further look at condensing that footprint. We don't necessarily feel like it's helpful to go to 6 stories, but we may look at that unit mix, which is pretty big right now of 1 bedroom to 2 bedroom den. We have a couple of those contemplated in this footprint, but I think we're at the early stage of taking the tangible kind of natural resource information and trying to figure what is that right fit for this building. And since Tim's meandering over, I'll let him talk.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. The question particularly about Zavago is totally pertinent. And Zavago started off, and I don't know if any of you were in the audience or participated in the question and answering exercises that we had, but I believe we had about 1,200 people during Zavago come to the open houses like we're having right now for that Zavago development, and no one really knew what it was going to be. We started off with in the 70s, like 78 is, I believe. I'd have to look back. But we felt relative to the demand, that was a good size for the marketplace. And we were talked down from that. Those of you who are friends of Breckwoods, I see many buttons. Glenn Scoville was one of the persons that really didn't want us to come to town. And after we came to town and had a dialogue with Glenn, and Glenn is a metaphor. Glenn is a metaphor for so many of the other people that we touched that came to us and started talking to us just as you all are and saying, this is what's important. You can't do that. Please consider this. And then we melded that discussion that we had with this great quality group of people. But Glenn was not a supporter until he became a supporter because we did the right things the right way for the right reasons. That was a commitment we had made. At the grand opening of that, Glenn came up to me and shook a piece of paper. I've asked him if I could retell this story. He says, fine. And it's accurate, by the way. He shook this piece of paper in front of me and said, we were standing right in front of the Lutheran church, kind of looking at the development from that direction. And there were a couple hundred people wandering around, looking at the building, and the owners were happy to show it off and the rest of it. Glenn came up and said, Tim, you lied to me. I said, geez, Glenn, I didn't really. I really didn't. He said, you did too. And he showed me this rendering. That is similar to some of the stuff you'll end up seeing once we talk about what the architecture is going to look like. And Glenn said, you said this building would look like this, and it doesn't. I said, Glenn, I think it does. We're looking at the building, looking at the rendering. And he said, no, Tim, it doesn't. The building looks better than what you said it would look like. And that's the story. He also said in that same breath, and you actually could have gone to 4 floors. And so many other people said the same thing. There's huge demand for people. And this is a great knitting through this discussion that Ben is leading. There is such a need in this community for good alternatives to staying in your home longer than what you might want to. But there's nobody that I've ever met in your community that wants to leave. You are more connected to your community than so many others. And Ben and I, our company has been involved in 48 cooperative housing developments all around, from Duluth to Rochester, all around the Twin Cities. You are unique. You're very unique that nobody wants to move. But we can accelerate the new people wanting to become and move into single-family homes if we can give a little cross-section of our community an alternative to stay in an environment that's one-level living, that's ownership. You don't want to not be owners. You don't want to be relegated simply to rental. The people that come to us would not move from the homes that they live in, particularly not in your neighborhood, if it weren't for the fact that this was ownership and this cooperative housing development inspires community, relationships, living better, longer. It's true, it works, it's phenomenal, and melding together a phenomenal housing type in a phenomenal neighborhood where people want to stay allows those homes to be freed up for other people that want to come. And I think that's the absolute bottom line dynamic that exists here. And it existed at Sebago. Now we have 224 units being waited for in a 49-unit building. So we're not just about greed. We're doing the right things the right way for the right reasons. We're really finding that balance from an operating perspective. Sebago is a little small, to be quite honest. A few more units would help that operate more efficiently. But too many units would make it feel like an institution. And we know, absolutely, we know, we have been here. We've listened. We do a good job. And we know you are not an institutional neighborhood. You are a neighborhood of boutique elements. And we want to be that additional boutique element. So I think that's where Sebago influenced our movement here.
Here's so cool that you both had experience from the earlier development plans that master builders had that didn't open out, and for various reasons. That in looking at the Lauderdale property at that time, there were issues of access, road access, infrastructure. Had to have 70 housing units, people coming and going. How will you work the roads? That's always an issue in there.
Great question. A lot of the comments we've had, the first meeting we had where we basically showed nothing. I know you were there for that. The second meeting where we showed something, we've got some traffic analysis. We'll do a full-blown traffic study with whatever that preferred kind of plan is. But as of right now, if we took kind of what this concept looks like and attach it to any of those other pieces that are on concepts 1, 2, and 3 for the St. Paul side, we're going to try to provide multiple avenues, even from this specific site, out into the neighborhood so there's not one point that's overburdened by that traffic. And what you'll also see by this type of use, and why we feel pretty bullish, not only that it's a great site for our co-op, from a traffic perspective, we're the least intrusive by unit to any other use that comes in. We're somewhere just under 4 trips per day. You go to a townhome, you're somewhere in that 6 to 8. Single family is 8 to 12. Just depends on where specifically that is. If you've got kids, it bumps up the trips. Inherently, it just does. So we feel pretty good that if we ended up at 70, we'll have a path that doesn't overburden the neighborhood, other than it's a change in use from what existed previously when Luther was, thriving in the spaces that were more the extension of their campus. But it shouldn't work. We're much less intense. You mentioned kind of the master development proposal before. we're like less than half of the total units, even within this entire development area, than what they had contemplated.
And that's a great point. I mean, people have said in this meeting, people have said in the open houses, how do you know? Well, for starters, we're starting with half, you know. So a good way to get your traffic count down is not be as dense. And there's that balance that says, well, we need density. Well, we need density for what reason? For density's sake? No, for preservation's sake, to our point earlier. We need preservation, or we need density for making sure the uses fit well within the neighborhood. But density for density's sake, we are not 700 units of housing in this community. And we believe wholeheartedly it shouldn't be. That's why we're a better choice to Luther Seminary to get something that can practically get done, that doesn't burden, but enhances the neighborhood for the reasons that I outlined. And of course, Ben's continuing to do a great job.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to add on to what the president said. How the back pattern, I also want to add it by foot patterns. So my mom lives in Seminary Park.
Yeah.
And I live in Lauderdale.
Okay.
I know these streets. I through Brackwoods, or I went down with Hansel on the seminary, or see the long way on Hammond, and I'm down Lavender. And it just, I knew where to go.
Yep.
And I always feel, no matter we have seen it inside, just, I would want to be able to know that that's going to stay. I mean, the paths might be switched up, but just like fancy, I think it just makes people feel really welcome. For sure, my mom knows this is her year. Yep, they don't have like had all these. Yeah.
Yeah, very fair. So just to make sure everybody heard it. So comments about you live in the neighborhood, your mom's at Sebago, St. Anthony Park. You're close. You're a little bit further up north off Larpenter.
Well,
Did I get that right?
I'm just literally on Larpenter on the same side of the brook.
Oh, on the same side. Got it. But the importance of those connections through this property being sustained by whatever we end up doing. And I'll tell you, of all of the comments, we got a lot of things that we expected to. Traffic was going to be a topic. The preservation of the woods is going to be a topic. The biggest comment, though, so far, very similar to what you're just outlining. How are you going to sustain our ability as a neighborhood to live through this place that we're looking at transforming that doesn't feel like a foreign object? So our company being kind of the lead on putting this development together, that's the conversation we're having with the other development partners on the St. Anthony Park side of the equation of how do we best do that. It'll be a massaging of what these concepts are. It won't be so straight block-esque. This was the best way that we could compel people the adult study plans like we maybe do all the time to just tangibly digest, oh, that's single family, that's single family, that's single family, apartment, condo, those kinds of things. So we laid it out a little bit more blocky, just so it was easier for people to self-direct. What are we trying to say could happen? Now we're back to the drawing board and saying, now let's make it feel like St. Anthony Park, that it is. So when we come back with that preferred plan, our endeavor is we've got a little bit more, I use the term with the St. Anthony Park task force that's been formed. We're going to put a few more wiggles in the plan than what you see up here. So it feels like a natural extension. That's been our objective. I haven't said that in front of this group yet. Our objective, even when we got this property under contract, was we want to take the neighborhood as it is and expand it through the property. That's our holistic objective. It'll feel a little bit different because it's newer. There's not a whole lot that's absolutely as new as it is, but we want this to feel like Lauderdale, feel like St. Anthony Park. It needs to feel like the neighborhood that it's in and not like we just crossed something into the property for the sake of checking a box.
I think that's a great point, Ben. And you guys don't know us from Adam, but I'm here to tell you that we really did our deep dive earlier. And we understand you probably better than any other outsider can. And that whole objective of not not going down this path and taking a left and another right to get to where you're going, but getting there this way is going to be the excitement that Ben's talking about. And we sit down from a livability perspective with a passion for your neighborhood in mind. But then we listen too, and we ask questions. Our development before is a great question. Where do you walk? We have data that comes from 8 years ago, however long ago it was. We know where people were walking, and guess what? They're still walking in the same places. So we have listened, we've tried, and we think that next iteration of these listening experiences will be something that clicks with the vast majority. And then we're still not done. We'll still list, we'll still modify, and we'll get to the right conclusion. Because you get one chance to do it right. How many people have been through a community where you drive through and you say, this doesn't seem to fit? A lot of that happens today. So much of that happens today. That won't happen here. This will be like the Zavago building where some of the best professionals in the real estate industry wanted to come and see what we did. One of the individuals that I rank as the top tier individual in our space, a peer of ours, had to come, and he was on the corner of, literally on the parking, right by Luther Place and Como, parked, and said, now I see Bachman Hall, and then I see another building, where's yours? Where's Zavago? And I said, well, there's Bachman, there's Gullickson, and Zavago is right to the right of it. He said, no, that's another. Wait a minute. He said, that is your bill. That was a cool moment for us. It fit in the community. Why? Because we listen. We listened to the community, and then we took our expertise to that level. So I feel very confident that we know a lot. I'm not here to brag, and I'm not here to challenge you. Neither is Ben. But we are vested in your best interest, and you have a better chance in getting a great execution with us than anybody else, because the rest of the development industry doesn't listen, they talk.
Yes, sir. I'm glad that I waited until now to talk. I completely agree. I think that you guys, from all I've heard, you guys, I think, are a really good partner for this. You have the track record with Zavago. It also comes at kind of an interesting time in my life. My parents just moved into a co-op also, so I feel sort of connected to these issues that you bring up. I am a neighbor of the Breckwoods, though. I'm in a property adjacent to it there, 1573 Fulham, and just kind of here, this property right here. And so I went and saw the three concepts that you guys brought out at the last meeting, and the numbers that were put out there. So I'm glad to have you guys, but I'm going to push back on the numbers a little bit. So reading, and I'm doing this for everyone's sake, for Heather's sake too, for everyone on the administrative side at Lauderdale. So we have this HDRC zoning regulation that gives us 10 to 30 dwelling units per net acre. So I'm an engineer by trade. I'm interested in these things. So just in looking at the acreage, we have a little less than 3/4 of an acre at 2323 Hoyt, which is zoned low density residential right. So this is zoned 3 to 5 units per acre here. That's on the gross acreage. So for the woods total, we have about 6 acres. You said 8 earlier. I'm not sure about that. I think for the whole thing, we have about 6 3/4. And that's gross acreage. So the thing that I did recently after looking at these plans was looking at the contour elevation. So the thing about this Illy property is that there's a lot of it that's greater than 18% slope. So you have to look at that. And when you look at the retention pond and when you look at the area that's available that's under that slope, there's only about 1.5 acres it's available to those lots. 1.5 acres times 30 units per acre is only 45 units. So that's, far less than 70. So I wonder if that jives sort of with an analysis that you've done so far. These numbers affect your cash flow for the project. So I wonder if
Are we near a break-even point for you? I want it to work. I want it to work for you, but we have to push back. Some of these real numbers, right?
No, that's fair. I think for the fairness, well said. Yeah, so part of why I'm saying we'll change is we got our survey after we got the property under contract. So getting we could do kind of what we thought using some of the contour data that's available through Ramsey County to kind of estimate some of that stuff. But you're right. Now we'll get a little bit more intelligent. What is that net acreage and how does our proposal start to kind of quantify against the city's ordinance? So very fair point. This is not kind of last and final. This is just kind of where we are right now of starting it. But we'll continue to kind of poke and prod our project. I would totally hear
A co-op, back there I think was a great idea. Sure, agree with you guys.
Just let me just say something, and so much appreciated, especially the fact that everybody doesn't have to be a supporter, but we want everybody to understand where we're coming from and at least have a dialogue that's a civil dialogue. So thank you very much. That helps us. It's helped you. It helps the communities. Bingo. But I think too, your point is good. There is a tipping point, and it's not about greed. It's about getting something great done. And getting something great done has a requirement. The seminary can sell the property to anyone, and they can sell it for more money. They won't sell it for less money. So now we have this tipping point where we've got to make it work. And are we a 700-unit community? No. We have already factored into the fact that this needs to be less dense because the tolerance of you all as a community would accord, in our opinion, a high-density property across the board, utilizing all the land we possibly can in a high-density fashion. So balancing those things is very difficult. It's not about greed, it's about end product use, and it's about having to buy the property from the seminary for the price that we're paying. We're not arguing about it, we're not complaining about it, but we are the ones that they chose the price point that we did, and they could have chosen others that would come in at higher densities. So we're here, we're happy we're here, and we're happy about the dialogue. Even when somebody doesn't want what we're leading with, that dialogue will lead to a conclusion that will best fit the neighborhood.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm happy to. Yes.
Couple of quick ones. You mentioned trails.
Yes.
I assume you'll maintain them.
Trails is really a Lauderdale piece. Yes, we will have an ability of those trails being maintained, and as well as we're required to come up with a conservation easement that protects whatever those woods are. That we'll have.
You have input from the people that live here as to where those trails are, and
Great question. So we have input from the neighborhood on where those trails are. That's why we're here today. As much as we could keep talking and presenting, this is a listening exercise for us. So we have some assumptions of keeping kind of the most used trails generally in place moving forward. But we'd love to hear, make sure you keep this one. Or I go and see my mom, or I go see my friend, or I just do my loop. Heard that a lot. People walk through and kind of down, up, through kind of the other preservation areas that kind of back end the golf course, and then towards the fall course, and then back home, wherever home might be. So I think we're looking for you to tell us, make sure that you keep this route. I use it all the time. We'd love that. It either reinforces what we already know, or it may be a route that we're not as familiar with. So we're good for that.
one other quick one. The co-op buying, would that be open to everybody?
The
Now, senior citizens
buying.
or say, or
Right now, our cooperative model focuses on
The park, the Breck Woods you're talking about, or the building?
the building. I'm talking about, yeah, if you want to buy a place.
the cooperative building. So our model right now focuses on a 62 or older. If you travel in a pair, only one of the two of you needs to be 62 or older. Make sense? Yes.
I'm obviously advocating for urban forests.
Yes.
Those are essential in this time of global warming. We see it more and more each year, the need. And the need not only to preserve what you have, but to expand it. I know this is completely different, but with the sale of the golf course, that perhaps it can expand the green space into that to keep whatever moss from half in the acreage of Breckwoods. But Breckwoods was hit really hard by the emerald ash borer, and then invasive species went in, and it's not healthy right now. What are your plans to restore the woods, and then how will it be maintained going forward after you put in your project?
Yeah. So part of our discussion, even with, so we've got kind of three other co-developers, I call it, that are looking to be involved in St. Paul. And what we've talked about is just what you all that support the Breckwoods, it's an amenity, not just for this specific lower campus, but for the neighborhood. So we're strategizing on how best can we not put only the onus of maintenance or kind of enhancing the woods, wherever those opportunities may be, on kind of this entire sub-neighborhood within St. Anthony Park and Lauderdale to kind of help boost up the opportunity financially to support not only the trail connectivity that needs to be sustained ongoing, but also if there are opportunities for reforestation or kind of bringing back what was, because it's just not as healthy as it once was with something else. All those things to us are on the table, things that we're trying to figure out how best can we do whatever those components might be. But we will have a plan for it, probably as we land on not just the plan that our company focuses on for Lauderdale, but kind of the broader of what is that relationship that allows the public to continue to access free of charge, sustains it, and then financially, are there other opportunities that allow us to kind of add back maybe what it had been 5-10 years ago before some of that, emerald ash borer, some of that disease crept into the woods.
Ben and I are both wearing Friends of Breckwoods buttons, not because we're trying to be gratuitous, but because we're supportive. Glenn Scolo gave us these buttons and said he would give us this button to wear on with one condition. If we'd wear it this proudly, he'd wear buttons that supported us proud. It's a partnership, and it's a relationship that starts with a dialogue, and it ends. As we sat in the Breckwoods meeting, we said, and this is a think tank, this is a fantasy discussion. Let's throw out the ideas that make it best and see how we can build that to a conclusion that brings the Friends of Breckwoods in. There's a tremendous amount of support by people who care deeply. That's good. That helps. That helps everything work better.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Here listing flats, he did a
Oh, yeah.
elevator speech.
Elevator suite on flats. Good list. So if you haven't been up to the concept boards and you do later this evening, the yellow footprints that are up there, we've been calling flats. And really what that is we also have condos represented on some of the concepts up there. The flats is an owner-occupied model that is similar to a condo, but it probably is not as pricey. It's probably more like a smaller apartment building, has a mix of units that are maybe smaller and more financially attainable for a broader spectrum of people. But it's owner-occupied product as well. And the one thing I'd share with this group, obviously the three concepts in different ways put a bunch of different uses in place, everything from single family to row home, those flats, apartments, condos, and co-ops. Right now, the groups that we are working with moving forward, it's all owner-occupied products. Single family, those flats, condos. We don't have a developer, and it's not our expertise to force an apartment. So moving forward, I think some of the comments even here of like, how will we know that whatever this turns into feels like our neighborhood? Well, not only are we having these kinds of dialogues with you all, with a focus on owner-occupied product, we all have to sell to people that end up living in there and they don't want to feel like the foreign object. So we feel really good that right now we're dealing with a collection of people focused on a myriad of housing types, but all focused on owner occupancy. So I think we have a better success opportunity in working with like-minded co-developers with us towards a common objective there.
And at a myriad of price points as well.
Yeah,
That's the whole objective. It's not all of one thing.
correct.
Just like your neighborhood now, there's different price points. We're appealing to different people at different price points to make it a more eclectic group of buyers into that neighborhood versus a very homogeneous buyer economic and age
But
price.
yeah, we know this, you know this. The neighborhood as it is exactly that. It's a mix, a blend of a lot of it. The only thing that we don't have that we know exists in the neighborhood, we just don't have that rental component directly. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Where are co-developers?
The other co-developers, so we have a custom home builder, we have 2 custom home builders, and then someone that's more focused on that condo piece. So we're working with them on kind of giving them the opportunity to kind of be announced into theirs. So I don't want to be ahead of kind of what we've talked to them about, but we'll have that information here soon.
So we have the agreement. More.
We do. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
That's a question about cost estimates. I know you get permitting from the Cap Regional Watershed District in terms of what you do through water and treatment. And I'm just wondering, I think it might be, why do you engage with vendor balance, what you're doing, and also to have some maps that kind of outline already they oversee a part of that.
Yeah, there's an existing easement here.
Yes.
Yep.
Right. So they maintain that already. They already plant trees in that area. Instead of what you were in, does that garbage just show up to your planning process?
So Jennifer, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Every other municipality we work with, as we get into our initial our formal application process, we're usually also giving a heads up to the watershed district of here's our approach. We have a stormwater analysis that's done on what we're proposing, how we're meeting kind of the regulations they have from a stormwater perspective. Is a big detail, but at least our approach right now across the board for this project, while you're not seeing new individual ponds, we have no desire to send more open flow water into this pond. Most of our stuff, the co-op or any of the other products, we're looking at below ground solutions to leverage kind of the usability, again, of the overall site. It will just give us the most flexibility, but from a procedural standpoint, the watershed district starts getting informed as we start submitting formal applications. We'd have a permit through them, like we would pull a permit from the city. Is that about right, to your knowledge?
The one piece I would add to that is this particular project is required to go through a PUD process under our ordinance. The PUD basically has a 3-step process. So the first step is a concept plan. During that conceptual planning, there's probably been initial interaction with the watershed, but they don't have any formal application or permit request in front of them, but they've informed them of the project. They might have some preliminary feedback to give them some ideas, things like you can't use the pond, for example, for additional runoff. So that would happen during that conceptual phase, but it doesn't necessarily, there wouldn't be an active permit application with them. Once they move into the second step, the general development phase of the PUD, that's when more detailed civil engineering plans get developed. And that's usually or typically when the stormwater permit requirements start to trip in. The stormwater report has to be generated. It has to demonstrate that the actual plan of what they, shown in that submission, that the water can be treated appropriately and managed appropriately. So they're a little bit early in terms of that. However, I'm sure that they've started some of those preliminary discussions. During that concept, we still might see not exactly what will end up being the case in terms of stormwater. But by the time we hit that second phase of that PUD process is when we absolutely would need all of those detailed plans.
And that's consistent with everything we've done and will continue to be consistent with everything we do.
Yes, sir.
Except parallel operational question going forward, long term. this can be no occupied for in development. It's sitting on, a couple acres of property within 6 to 8 acre chunk of land. You're talking about trails, etc. I spent 35 years as a park engagement center manager, so trails got my interest right away.
Yep.
When you sell to the co-op members, you bet, does the co-op then become the owner of the entire parcel? Okay. And therefore responsible for long-term maintenance of trails, etc.
It's a great question.
Who becomes
Who
takes care?
So the cooperative under our scenario becomes the owner of all the land. But if there are easements or other mechanism instruments of like sharing costs more broadly amongst kind of the entire lower campus development, they would be subject to that as well. They would own it, but it doesn't preclude us from having a public easement like across the trail or the walkways, whatever we want to call those today, that maybe the city has interest in something, or they'll leave it up to us and we'll kind of, again, try to share as much of those financial burdens, just so it's not left to one entity, when it's really for more of a public or a broader good. So that's kind of where we're headed in general approach. The specifics, we're not there yet because you haven't landed on exactly what are we building. But generally the co-op would own the property, but there could be some other things in place that help with maintenance. Yes.
Could I also add? So I'd also like to add the fact that per our ordinance, we are requiring that the area that is protected and dedicated has to be held within a conservation easement. And I bring that up because there's likely to be some trails that go through that conservation easement area. And the way that works is that the fee title would likely remain owned by the co-op, or if there's some, because they're doing a master development, if you will, whoever the ownership entity is, would own the fee title of that property. The conservation easement would be held by a qualified 84C. So there are very specific requirements of who can actually hold that conservation easement. In this case, it would not be the developer, because the developer typically cannot hold that conservation easement. I bring it up only because this will get more complicated as time goes on, in terms of then you'll have dedicated trail easements or trail corridors likely within the conservation easement, that whoever the conservation easement holder is will be able to say, here's what we permit as the holder, what we're accepting of, and here's what we're not. So, for example, I've worked in some conservation easements where the conservation easement holder says, we will not accept any paved trails in our conservation easement. We'll accept, chip trails, turf trails, those types, but we will not, because it is contrary to the conservation easement objective. So once the conservation easement holder is identified, then the next step of that conversation is to start that now what actually can go into the conservation easement in terms of trails or other, amenities, if you will, and then who's responsible for maintaining them and how does that happen? So just to add another layer of complexity to this, but also protection, because I know that has been a huge part of the conversation over the years. We will have that entity that comes into play, and then we will, as both a developer and city and conservation easement holder, have to figure out how some of those improvements get managed and maintained, and by whom. So,
Great question.
And that's been a great question that has been asked all along, and our kind of broad brush answer to that, very specifically and more broadly, is exactly in tune with what we've just heard. Nobody's going to be locked out, because there's going to be this conservation easement that exists, and how we all participate in making that work is the next step and evolution of what we're going through, in concert with, as you suggested, so many other elements of making this community really tied together, cohesive, neighborhood-friendly, walkable, livable, and consistent with the ideals that really are established by Lauderdale and St. Paul.
So I know that we might get a few more questions, and it's not because I don't want to take them, but I'd like to stop talking a little bit, only because I really want to make sure that you all have a chance to come up digest any information that you haven't, Tim, myself, and Jennifer volunteers stick around as well. But if there's anything that you want to talk to us more directly about, please pull us aside. We're happy to go through it. I just conclude more of the presentation side to give you a chance to, we want to hear from you. So you have comment cards. If you haven't gone through kind of the 3 concepts that are over here, there's a place for you to do that on the comment card. There's also kind of our initial concept of what's happening in Lauderdale, is a place to give us feedback on that as well, or anything else you want to share with us. We're welcoming it at this point. We want to get that application in the right way with feedback before just stepping in and assuming you know what we know or we appreciate what you appreciate about the property. So I'll conclude it tonight. Thank you again for coming, and we'll be around to answer any questions. Thanks.